For years, and particularly since 2020, college campuses have not shied away from taking strong stances on contentious social and political issues. But suddenly, there is a growing movement to adopt institutional neutrality and veer away from partisanship in college administrations. So after campuses erupted in pro-Palestinian protests and encampments last year, which are resurfacing now that the school year has begun, it seems that colleges recognize something had to change, especially with internal reports confirming that Jewish students on campus were harassed and threatened. So Franny, set this up for us. What is the big question at stake here from your point of view, especially given the fact that young people just don't seem all that gung-ho on traditional American values like free speech?
So you can call me a hopeful optimist on this one, but I think this is an incredibly promising sign that universities want to recommit themselves to being institutions of higher learning, to recommit themselves to the values of actually wanting to promote open inquiry and discussion in the classroom. So I think this is a really great first step for universities to regain that value that I think we've seen has kind of eroded over the past few years. Now, that's the administrative side. There's also the student side of things. And I think the biggest threat to students and to bringing that value of open inquiry back into the student body is actually the other students on campus who there is so much vitriol that you can face for being seen as a wrong thinker on a college campus. And I even have a personal story with this. I wasn't in college all that long ago. And I remember when I majored in public policy in college, and the dean of my department sent out an email after the Kyle Rittenhouse decision came down. And Kyle Rittenhouse, he was the young guy, I think he was like 17 in Wisconsin. He ended up getting off. He had a gun and he ended up getting off scot-free. He basically, I think he went to trial. Okay, I'm exposing myself. I don't remember all details of the case. But basically what happened was the dean of my university, she issued a statement saying that the fact that he didn't face any punishment, the fact that he was put in front of a jury at trial of his peers and found to be not guilty, she said it was appalling. And I remember at the time being kind of struck by that and being like, that's kind of weird that she took such a strong stance on that. But I wasn't going to say anything. I was scared. And I remember there was a group on campus that was a free speech advocacy group. So not a political group, not taking a side. And they issued this open letter saying she shouldn't have done that. She shouldn't have spoken out and made such a strong statement, calling it appalling, because she's the dean of a school that's literally a public policy school. It should be debated. It should be a conversation. And I remember that being circulated around, and all the kids that signed that letter, they were all ostracized. And I think that is what is really the biggest threat on college campuses for young people today, is that talk about courage. It takes a lot of courage to put yourself out there like that in front of your peers and stand up for what you believe in, even when it's something that's not that controversial, like institutional neutrality, which now that we're seeing it happen is actually becoming a popular trend. So I'm glad to see it happening. I think it's a good step in the right direction.
I love the way you frame that because I have taken actually a lot of heat from my own community on this. I'm an extreme skeptic of the sort of Jewish students are unsafe on college campus. These Harvard students, the most privileged people on planet Earth, saying that they are unsafe because they have to pass by these encampments of chanting lunatics. I think that what they're actually asking for is the safetiest standard that has been granted to other minorities. And I feel that it is a crime against Jewish history for Jews to accept that standard rather than, basically scoff at it. So I really love that you said ostracism, because that's really what they're facing, in my view, is unpopularity. Michael, am I just being totally callous about the feelings of these young people? Should they be expected to bear the brunt of, their sociopathic, co-students, or should this neutrality be imposed from above to protect them?
No, I mean, it's a complicated issue, and I, generally agree with this idea that nobody should adopt the status that, has become de rigueur on campus, that, make sure that everyone's protected. This is not a place that academically you should feel protected. That's where I think the difference is, if people are being physically threatened. And by the way, the one place I disagree with you, Batya, is that even Harvard students and even the elites, they can feel safe too. It's like, even if you have a lot of money, it's all right to protect them too. But the thing about this is, I don't want to disagree, because I agree with Francesca on this. The one thing I would say is slightly different in my perspective here, is that I want to acknowledge why this is happening. This is not because people have come to a conclusion of this is what an institution of higher learning should be doing. This is what our forward foot should be. This actually means stuff to us when we think about the kind of ideology of a university. No, it's because Congress happened, because people lost their jobs, because they had instances with the police on their campus. They couldn't function as a campus. And if it was just this idea about free speech, because it's insane that institutions should have any opinion on anything. I wrote a piece for the Free Press about my time at Vice. And one of the bits of that, I talked about when, the Kyle Rittenhouse is a very similar thing. George Floyd stuff happened. Every time there was something that was perceived to be a hate crime, some of which turned out to be false, we would get an email from HR saying, if you need any, counseling in this very dire time. It's like, we're fucking journalists. No, we're supposed to be out there talking to people, not weeping in the corner. Why? And also, why are you making statements? That was the thing, because there was this sort of instinct that to be on the right side of history, and it's always framed that way, that you have to take a position on something as an institution, particularly an institution that people don't really realize until recently is so deeply politicized, from, what the physiotherapy department to the film department to the Spanish department. The Spanish department at my university, remember, I had to walk through it, and there were pictures of Che Guevara everywhere, and Castro and stuff. And it's like, no, this is not what's supposed to be happening. So I don't know if it's gonna actually happen, or if they're doing this just because they're upset that people are on their tails at this point. It's going to take a lot institutionally to break this apart, because they are very, very, very political institutions.
So Josh, I want to hear your thoughts on all of that. One question I'm very curious to hear your thoughts on is, it's so amazing how they give up on all of these American values and suddenly rediscover them when they can be used as cudgels against Jews, right? Like, that was my first thought when seeing this. But, close us out, close the show out. Give us your final thoughts on, this neutrality.
Yeah, well, I agree with almost all of what Michael said, but let's be clear. These colleges' decisions to embrace institutional neutrality, which, by the way, 3 cheers for that. I think, by the way, these heated debates, the organizations, media companies, colleges certainly should not have ever been weighing in on contentious public policy issues. It was insane. 2019, 2020, I can't tell you how many friends and family members were getting, these missives on contested political issues, and as if there was only one right position from their companies. I mean, we lost our minds during that moment, and I'm very relieved that institutional neutrality is making a comeback. But let's be clear why colleges are doing this. It's because of what happened after October 7th, and the fact that they have just a large constituency of, frankly, like anti-Israel and even in some cases anti-Semitic hate on campus, and they don't want to alienate. They realize that this is the only way out. They can't satisfy their protecting their Jewish students and allowing them to have free speech while and they feel like they're indulging. They want to indulge the anti-Israel students, and they realize they can't thread that needle, and they need to find a way out. And institutional neutrality is the way to do it. It's saving the most political faces possible. That is the reason. The hypocrisy on free speech. I mean, these colleges were not free. Fire's ratings show how poorly the Ivy League schools were doing on free speech. Harvard, got an F. And now they're rediscovering they're not rediscovering the principles of free speech, but they're rediscovering how it can be politically helpful. So you don't have the crises that they've been experiencing over the last year. So I think it's a great development. I think the notion of like public schools giving students like an hour to protest their favorite policy, this never should have happened. Schools are a place of learning and to study, and to not have administrators putting the fingers on the scales of contentious political issues. So I hope this is the new normal, and it's unfortunate that it took October 7th and the hypocrisy on that issue for them to actually see the light.
And do you think this is going to bring them the millions that they've been losing from the Ackermans of the world rolling back in?
No, I mean, well, look, I mean, look, the big question to me is is Harvard always going to have that elite status, or can you really like shoot yourself in the foot so many times that there'll be a new Harvard in 20 years, like there'll be a new.
And by the way, if they're trying to figure out what to do with that money, the Free Press, it's a pretty good publication, don't you think?
They can provide it to everybody.
It's a suggestion. I'm not saying you have to, but I do want to say one thing before you close this out, Batya. Josh said that he agreed with everything in my answer. And Josh, you're coming back. You're coming back as a guest on the show because you know exactly how to do it. You were both fantastic, but you said the right thing.
You stole some of my thunder, so I had to credit where credit is due.
And just FYI to future guests, I disagree with everything Michael said, and I'm still here. So.
Yes. Yes.
Josh and Franny, thank you so much. That was so interesting, and we're so grateful to you for joining us. Thank you to our audience for joining us, and remember to comment. We want to know what you think. We're reading your comments, and we're really enjoying them, whether they're positive or negative. Tune in next week for another episode of the Free Press Live, and if you haven't already done so, go to thefp.com and subscribe so you don't miss anything.